Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. You can't see me. For some reason, my camera doesn't seem to be working. But anyway, I'm Britton Trice with Garden District Bookshop. So I'd like to welcome everybody today, and especially our author, Chris Joseph, and his moderator, or in conversation with his friend, Paul Sanchez. Paul, I think everybody knows, is a New Orleans musician and writer and bon vivant of town. Paul, welcome to our virtual event. Our events are a little bit different these days, but we seem to be having fun with these virtual events, and so I want to welcome everybody. And so anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Chris and Paul, and Chris is going to talk about his wonderful new memoir. Very touching, Chris, and
Thank you.
I've started it, but look forward to reading the rest of it, and we look forward to hearing more about it today.
I just want to say that I'm happy to be in a bookstore, even if it's virtually.
Well, we are open for business, so if anybody in town, come on by, and we'll have Chris's book, and look forward to selling some of those for Chris. So anyway, welcome, and I'll turn this over now to Paul and Chris.
Thank you all for coming in and joining us. I recognize some faces and some names of people I can't see. I think before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to memory of Dan Baum, who passed away a few days ago.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
He did. He passed away on October 8th. He had been struggling with cancer for a few years. Many of you know Paul and I worked on 9 Lives together a few years ago. So we're probably going to talk about that later in the hour, but I did want to give a shout out to Dan. I thought I would start out by giving a brief reading from the book. And when I say a brief reading, it's really going to be brief. Partly because I hate doing these things, and partly because writing the book was tough, having to relive the cancer journey, and then I'm finding reading it out loud to people is also tough. So I'm going to keep this intentionally short, and then Paul and I will launch into a discussion, and I think Paul's going to sing a couple songs after I do this reading. So here goes. A man who introduced himself as a radiologist entered the room where I had been nervously sitting and fidgeting for more than 30 minutes. With a solemn face and a seemingly sad voice, he bluntly said, "Sorry to give you bad news. We found a mass in your pancreas." Whatever he told me after that, I didn't hear. It was as if someone had hit the mute button. All I could see was that he was still talking, but there wasn't any sound coming out of his mouth. He came on at the end to say, "Talk to Dr. Moscale. You can go home." A routine visit to get some medical tests had turned into a calamity. It starts with the first breath and then with a cry. It ends with the last breath on the day you die. And in between, life is a ride.
Starts with the first breath, then with a cry. It ends with the last breath on the day you die. And in between, life is right, 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 life is right. It's confusing, mysterious, and sometimes not fair. Most of the time we're not in charge of what's here and what's there. And in between, life is right, 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 life is right. Sometimes it goes too high, sometimes way too fast. You hold on with all your might and wonder how long it might last. But who knows, life is right, 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 life is right. No idea what the next turn will bring. You're all strapped in, but that don't change a thing. 'Cause after all, life is a ride, life is a ride, life is a ride, life is a ride. Well, it's real and you feel mixed up inside, and half the time you're just terrified. But the door is open just so wide. If you don't slip through, you will be denied of all the things that are on your side to help you navigate the tide, like some folks who never even tried to live at home in their own right. Well, you're born, you live, you die, and the only way you laugh and cry, and you try to think of a reason why, and sometimes you just can't believe you're right, and you try and you try and you try, but in the end you're just another guy who hangs his head to sigh and sigh and laugh at yourself with your foolish jive, 'cause you work so hard and you come up shy, but there ain't no way to say goodbye. It's just a bucket of dirt and a shoot right by, just a bucket of dirt and a shoot right by, just a bucket of dirt and a shoot right by, just a bucket of dirt and a shoot right by.
Paul, thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
My pleasure.
Paul, when you were singing, I was starting to think you and I have had hundreds of conversations over the last 13 years since we met in 2007. We've never had 35 people listening to our conversations like this. So makes it a little different, but I'm wondering, Paul, if you would want to talk about if you remember how we met back in 07, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about Threadhead stuff, and then we can launch more into the book and my book, maybe a little bit
I was
about.
invited by Jeff. I think Cowboy Mouth had played a gig up in Jackson Hole, and Jeff Potter, who is the king of Jackson Hole, I'm pretty sure, invited me to this thing called the Pottery. And he said, maybe I could sing with John Boutte. And it was after the flood, and I was just in shock, and in fact, on that boat, I met some people who said, I could come and live in Belize for a while. And so I did. I lived in Belize for 3 months just because I didn't know what else to do. So I love John Boutte, and sure, chance to play with him. It was lovely. And he was in shock too. And we just got up and did an acoustic set, the two of us. And, there's a lot of love on the stage when we play together. And that's what it was, really. And there's some good music, of course, because he's him. And afterwards, this fellow from California came up, Chris Joseph, and I didn't know him. And he said, "You guys are great together. You should make a record." And I'm kind of a smart ass. And I said, "Well, I just lost everything in the flood. I don't have money for rent, let alone make a record." And he said, "Well, how much do you need?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, I can get you that in a couple of weeks." And being in show business a long time, I said, "Yeah, right." And he said, "I'll call you." And I said, "Sure thing," thinking, yeah, I'll never hear from that guy again. But 2 weeks later, he called me and he said, "Where do I send the check?" And I was speechless because he didn't say, "I want to hear the music." He didn't say, "I want to own the music." He didn't say, "I want you to sign something." He said, "I want you to promise me on your word as a gentleman that you'll pay back the money off of the sales of the record. Because some of the people that put up are out of work and they could only put up $5, but they just really want to help." And I was floored, and accepting charity is never easy. You want to earn things on your own, but I took it and vowed that we would get them paid back. And John and I each made records with the money, and it felt great. It felt like, you were so not empowered after the flood. You were so powerless. I'm not a guy who can go out and swing hammers and that kind of thing. So I was looking for something to make me feel like I could help. And suddenly we had these 2 records, and the Threadheads, this organization of fans who call themselves Threadheads, they're music fans from around the world who met on a Jazz Fest thread. And they come to Jazz Fest every year and meet up, and they're called Threadheads. And they felt empowered. So they called me and they said, "We want to do another record." Now, I said, well, I'm kind of exhausted. I just did 2 records in a row. But I hear Craig Klein and the Nightcrawlers are trying to finish up the first brass band record since the flood, and they ran out of money. He said, great, put me in touch. And I put him in touch. And they made that beautiful Nightcrawlers record. And Shamar Allen went to him, and so many people. I think in 6 years, they raised over $5,600,000 that went toward making records in the New Orleans musical community by artists affected by the flood. In addition to that, they raised another $500,000 through the Pottery, the Fest for Kids organization, to give to musical related charities around the world, like New Orleans Music Clinic and teaching kids in Silence is Violence. And it's just, I can't say enough about the Threadheads. And it started with Chris and the crazy idea that they would have a not-for-profit record label, which I'm pretty sure is now an oxymoron in the English language. But they did, and it worked, and it lifted people. It didn't just lift them financially, because, you know, New Orleans artists only sell many CDs even after the flood. But it gave validation. It made us feel like artists again. It made us feel like we could make music and the people would hear the music, however many people it was. It made us feel like we hadn't drowned in the flood. And song by song, they helped rebuild the city, one song at a time. And the gratitude that all the artists felt for Chris came back to him 1,000-fold, as John Boutte likes to say, when we found out that he was diagnosed with cancer, because I got what money I could from the Threadheads and friends, but we had, you know, 2 days to make a record because he was leaving in 2 weeks to go to Germany for his treatments. And so I found a studio who would give me a good rate, and then I only booked a couple of musicians, and then word got out. I think it was Susan Cowsill who texted me and said, hey, I hear you're making a record. And I said, yeah, we don't really have too much money. And she said, cancer sucks, Russ and I are there. And then Debbie Davis heard, and she said, yeah, don't be ridiculous. I don't want money. I'm coming, so is Matt. And so many musicians, whoever's on the record, you know, they were there for Chris because of all he'd done for New Orleans. He's an amazing fellow, and I'm proud to call him my friend, and I'm proud to be discussing his book, which is honest, and it's filled with it's not all, you know, flowers. It's filled with real pain. It's filled with real anger. It's filled with real honesty. And it celebrates life in the way that life is supposed to be celebrated, which is with the truth.
So that was 13 years ago, 2007, when you and I crossed paths. In 2016, I got diagnosed. October 2016, 4 years ago this month, I got diagnosed. You started working on the album, which was to be called, well, it ended up being called Life is a Ride, but it was going to be called Tears of Healing. But in March or April of 2017, you and I started texting each other, and both of us had been through a ton of stuff over the last few years. Health issues, marriages that ended, you with the hurricane, leaving your band. And you and I were texting each other in March of 2017. And I know my interpretation of what I did. I want to hear your interpretation of when I sent you those lyrics for Life is a Ride. Because as I wrote in the book, for me, it was, oh my God, I'm sending this famous singer-songwriter these lyrics, and he's going to cringe. He's going to laugh. He's going to say something nice to me just because he's not going to be mean.
Well, first of all, I honestly believe that everybody, if they're being honest, has a song in them. You know, I might need to bend a couple of words or make something rhyme here and there, but I'm convinced I can write a song with anybody. In your case, you're one of my best friends, and we love each other as friends. We know a lot about each other. And you were in a crisis, and you sent me these really striking words. It starts with the first breath, ends with a cry, ends with the last breath on the day that you die. And I knew that that would be a song. And then you continued to send me some lines. And so the song, you know, you were writing the song, and I was trying to find the simplest music to stay out of the way of it. And then just before this, the day before the recording session, you sent me some lines that were just like, oh, these have to be added. So I sent it to Alex, and I said, what do you think of this, and what can you add to it? And I don't think he added anything to the verses or the chorus. He might have added some lines to the last verses. He added the opus at the end, where it's just this beautiful Dylan-esque free-form summation of the hope and the fruitlessness of existence. And it really made it something special. And that track, we were recording that, and Debbie and Susan had invited themselves to the session, right? And I only had so much time, so I counted on Carlo Nuccio to be the band leader, because Matt and Carlo and Alex had played together in Royal Finger Bowl and in Alex solo bands. They know each other like shorthand. So I just would say to Carlo, here's how the song goes. Pick a beat and talk to the guys about the arrangement, and let's go. And Carlo would listen, and he'd feel a beat, and he'd tell Matt what to do, he'd tell Alex what to do, and he'd count the song in. And Debbie and Susan happen to walk in just as that's going on. And I say, why don't you guys get in the booth and just sing along, you know, with the Life is a Ride thing. And so on that particular track, it's all cut live, and it's such a beautiful feeling. Everybody was there for you, and they all happened to coalesce into the studio at the same moment. And so we did the record in a day, and the young engineer who was mixing it, when I went in the next day, he said, you know, we were supposed to do this mix for 3 days, but I get what's going on here. This is real love. So we're going to get this done today. What do you want? And I said, give me your best mix. If you tell me it's great, then we're moving on. And he said, yeah, I've heard that before. Give me, what do you want? And I said, you're an engineer, I'm a songwriter. If you tell me what you did is the best you can do, I'm going to say great thanks and move on. So he said, all right, well, let's just do it, and then tell me what your tweaks are. And he pulled up the first mix for Life is a Ride. And he said, what do you think? And I said, is it the best you can do? And he said, is that all you got to say? And I said, yeah, if that's the best you can do, let's move on. He said, let me make a few tweaks. And he made a few tweaks, and he knew he had the freedom to make the record he wanted to make. And part of the reason the record is so beautiful and honest is because the engineer delivered the love that was in the studio onto the masters.
By the way, I took some notes before we joined the call about things that I wanted to touch on. And one of the things I didn't write down, I'm going to say now because I don't want to forget it. Paul and I are talking about doing a book/house concert tour, hopefully in the spring. It's COVID permitting. It depends how we're all doing. But
Maybe the summer.
Maybe the summer. Maybe about 12 cities around the U.S. So I just wanted to plant that seed in case any of you want to host a house concert. I see Mark Ravago and Mark Hughes, and yeah, there'll be a few of you.
We could fit a few people.
And Barry. So what I wanted to ask, let me back up. I emailed a few people and asked them if they had any questions. And the first question that one of the threadheads had for both of us, Paul, is how are we doing now? How are we doing? So you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Well, your situation was way more serious than mine, so you go first.
The short answer is, and I feel a little guilty saying it because of all the struggles that people are having with COVID, is that I'm doing great. I feel better than I have in years and years and years. It's every day I count my blessings. Every day I practice gratitude. There aren't a lot of 4-year third stage pancreatic cancer survivors walking around. In fact, there are very few. And so I know I'm lucky. But I'm doing great. I mean, I'm living life. I've been traveling a little bit, even during COVID. You know, I'm still parenting, still being a boyfriend to Susie, still working full time. Managed to write the book during the pandemic. So yeah, I feel great. I feel really great. And I'm really happy that I can say that.
For me, reading Chris's book was really painful, because as a friend, I felt like besides the record, I hadn't been very present in his pain and his lostness, because my second wife had gotten breast cancer in 2013. And when she beat it, you know, and when she got better, she just split. She just decided she didn't want to be married anymore. And I kind of lost my mind, because we've been married like 20 years, and I thought she was the thing. And I booked as many gigs around the world as I could, hoping I could get tired enough to drop. And songs just started spitting out of me. I think I did 4 albums in 3 years. So I was really lost in my own pain and in my own journey. And while I passed through Chris's pain and his journey. In reading this book, I didn't feel like I'd been there enough for him. So it was a real lesson in how isolating cancer can be when I read your book. And it allowed me some forgiveness for my ex, because she was probably incredibly lost in her own cancer and her own recovery. It allowed me to forgive myself because I was lost in my own pain, but it allowed me to understand just how strong you had to have been to endure so much of it on your own. And again, share it so honestly in your book.
Thank you for saying that. I never thought for a second that you didn't do enough or didn't reach out enough. And I also never thought for a second that I was strong enough to get through it. I mean, there was, for those of you who read the book, this. There were many times, countless times, I thought, I'm not going to get through this. I'm not going to get through this. I mean, thankfully, after 4 years, most of those thoughts had diminished. They still pop up.
You thank Brad Willis in your book for his book, The Warrior Pose. And that book helped me because, I drove myself into the ground. I had this rare dental condition called Ludwig angina in November of 2018 that I almost died from and had to have emergency surgery. Then I had spine surgery in 2019. I developed this thing called vocal dystonia where I couldn't speak or sing for 9 months. So it's been a long comeback trail to be able to speak and sing again. But again, nothing compared to what you went through. But I forget where I started with that.
We were talking about, you had mentioned Brad Willis and
yeah, so like that book of his really got me through, and I know it did you. And I follow him on Facebook now, and you stayed alive for the same reason he did. Like it was his 4-year-old son crawling into his lap and saying, "When are you gonna get up and play with me?" And he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna figure out a way to beat cancer and to beat this, back situation." And he did. And I think your love for your sons and your determination to see them graduate, high school and college, that's love. Love heals. That's what the book was saying. Yeah. It's not the hatred of cancer that heals, that it's not the fear of cancer that heals. It's embracing, love heals everything, man. And so that's, I think, what was part of your trip was that Brad taught you to keep love in your heart. And here you are, kid graduating high school, and I'm sure getting more and more smart-assed every day, and that's great.
Yes, indeed. For those of you who don't know who Brad Willis is, this is a good plug for the book, just to piggyback on what Paul said. Brad Willis was a NBC News war correspondent for like 20, 25 years and had some terrible back issues and then contracted cancer in his neck and throat and tried the conventional stuff, and that wasn't working, and cured himself with yoga and with eating healthier and living life to the fullest, and also embracing his being a parent. The book is called Warrior Pose, and it's fantastic. It really is fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up and reminding me about that. Another question that I got asked, I'm going to take this one first, and then Paul, if you want to talk about some of the pivotal points in your life as well. People ask me, was there one day in particular during my cancer journey that was a key day or a pivotal day? And I thought about that. There were many of them actually, but the one that really stood out for me, at least right now, is the day I decided to quit chemotherapy 5 months into the journey. And as I wrote in the book, there was no plan B when I quit. I was convinced chemotherapy was going to kill me, and I think it actually would have killed me. My cancer was getting worse, so maybe it would have been a combination of the two that would have killed me. But I hated how I felt on chemotherapy. I hated it. And I was taken to UCLA Santa Monica Hospital in March of 2017, and I was convinced I wasn't coming out. Obviously, I did come out, and the next day I was supposed to go back to chemotherapy, and I decided not going to go, not going to do it. And I had no plan B at that point. I had nothing. I just thought, well, okay, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die of chemo, die of cancer. But that decision, which was not well thought out, turned out to be an amazing day and an amazing decision, because all of a sudden it opened up a wealth of opportunities and a wealth of alternatives that I had never considered. And it also, you know, Paul, to your point, it allowed me to embrace some things that I had not been looking at, embracing love, embracing connection, embracing other aspects of my health. And so that was a huge day for me, huge day. You want to talk about anything that you've gone through where
Well, you know, for me, that time, that was a good 10-month period of surgeries and having to have my larynx and vocal cords moved, and then the upper body trauma, the emotional trauma that left me with the vocal dystonia. But I tried to take it as a grace. I tried to take it as the universe just sent me a very humbling message. Because of the spine situation, I can't play guitar. It's too painful. Because of the dystonia, I can't speak, which anybody who knows me, I usually can't shut up, but I couldn't get 3 words out. I couldn't sing, which has been my life since I can remember, my salvation since I could remember. So I couldn't play guitar, I couldn't speak, and I couldn't sing. And the only way that I could be out of pain prior to the spine surgery was to keep my chin on my chest and create space in the vertebrae where the discs used to be. And so I found that to be the final irony, because if I kept my head bowed to the universe in humility and didn't sing, play, or talk, I would be out of pain. And so I did. That's how I meditated, and that's how I read Warrior Pose. And I did the same chants in the book as this is not my body. I am loving awareness. I am not just this body. And I kept searching for ways out. I kept searching for ways to get better, ways to find how to be me again. And then the pandemic happened, and I still hadn't gotten my voice back. So when isolation happened, it was kind of easy for me because I couldn't really see people anyway. I couldn't speak regularly, and my performances were really spotty. And so I just took it as a chance to really focus in on meditation and really focus in on healing my insides and my voice. And then my wife, Allison, bought a $250 piano at an estate sale. And I've never played piano in my life, but I always wanted to. And so I've spent the last several months learning how to play all my favorite Frank Sinatra songs and Johnny Hartman songs and all the jazz standards I can't possibly play on guitar, but have somehow figured out on piano. So I'm pretty thrilled.
that actually segues into the next question I was asked, again, for both of us. I suppose it's a two-parter. For me, it's, are you planning on writing another book? And for you, Paul, it's, are you planning on writing another album? But since you've also written a book, are you also planning on writing another book? I'm going to let you go first on this one.
I'm not really, I have written down stories, and I don't think they're a book yet. Tom Piazza and John Gregory Brown are 2 of my favorite writers. John grew up here, and Tom just loves New Orleans and is a resident. And when I read their writing, that to me is everything I love about great writers. And so I have some stories, but they're not great writing like these guys are. And so my friend Mike Mayhew and my brother John, who is the director, had the idea that instead of trying to write them down, do what I do best, which is to be a storyteller. So Mike's been coming by on Thursdays for the last few months, and I just tell stories and occasionally play songs, but mostly just tell stories about how I stumbled along the path to here. And we're just going to take our time and see what it turns into. It may turn into a podcast. It may turn into a show that we air on Patreon. It may turn into a 20-minute short film. I don't know. I know that people like me telling stories. I like telling stories, and Mike and Johnny wanted to capture that more than they wanted to capture like a broadcast or even to see my stories written, because they want to hear me do the voices. They want to see me be the griot, you know? And so it's kind of weird because we don't have a firm idea, but we got a lot of stuff shot, and we're liking what we're getting. And that's kind of a fun project to be a part of. There is no end. There is no, this is going to make money, or this is going to be this or that. It's we're making something, and we're not sure what it is yet, but we think it's going to be really fun.
And I noticed you didn't answer the question, are you going to make another album?
Well, you know, when I released I'm a Song, I'm a Story, I'm a Ghost, I said that was it. I'd done 4 albums in 3 years and I was tapped out. My body was tapped out. My mind, heart, and soul were tapped out. But playing the piano has been really fun. And I've loved Frank Sinatra's Wee Small Hours since I was a kid, Johnny Hartman and John Coltrane's records. So learning how to play some of those standards has really opened me up as a songwriter. And I've thought that maybe in a year or two, well, more like in 2 years or more, when COVID's gone away and I've gotten really comfortable on piano, I could take some of my songs that I've written in that style and do them with the right chordings, not just the folk rock chordings, and maybe even 1 or 2 standards, and do a piano album. That, for the moment, that would be the thing that would bring me back. As far as what I used to do, it feels like the whole world has changed, not just me. Like I announced my retirement and then the pandemic broke out. And I just thought it was fantastic of the universe to put all of you on pause while I figured out what was next. Because, you know, I didn't know what was next. And now I have plenty of time to figure it out. And none of us knows what life is going to be like after this pandemic. So I'm just trying to be a better piano player, a more forgiving and soulful person, and to enjoy being here. I have a house with someone who loves me. I play music and I play chess with people around the world when I get my hands get tired of playing music. It's a good life. So I'm gonna ride this COVID isolation until the people that know better, the scientists, do what they gotta do to protect us. And then I'll go back out in the world and have fun again.
Before we have you sing another song, I'm going to tell our listeners that I'm actually starting to outline another book, and it's going to be about epiphanies. And I don't think people are going to want to read a 200-page book about my epiphanies, so I'm going to ask a bunch of other writers to help out, each to contribute maybe 2 or 3 stories. My story, one of my stories, is going to be about how John Boutte, who I don't think is on the Zoom call, taught me about trust. And that's as far as I'm going to go
John
with
is a
that one right
great
now,
teacher.
because say that
John,
again?
I mean, John is not only a brilliant singer, but he's a brilliant singer because it comes directly from his heart and soul. And it's the same reason that he's great in those moments. He can teach you about trust because he's going to be honest with you. It might hurt, might sting, but he's going to be honest with you.
He, more than anyone else in my life, has taught me about trust. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'd rather wait until I write the story down rather than disclose it now. But so let's circle back to 9 Lives. This year, we lost Frank Minyard. We lost Ronald Lewis, I think, in April. And now Dan Baum.
Yeah. Dan was an amazing writer. I have to credit Coleman Decay for getting me to read the book and for writing the songs with me. Because I really didn't want to read something about Katrina. I'd lost everything in the flood. And I couldn't take it. But Coleman assured me it wasn't about Katrina. It was about life in New Orleans between the storms. And that's exactly what it was. And what Dan captured so beautifully was the joy in which we face despair. The indefatigable spirit of the citizens of New Orleans who, when beaten down to the ground, will get up and will hear a song and will dance again just because they can. And I loved his book, and I loved his memories of New Orleans that people spoke of. Now, what Dan did was he was very honest. You know, we were walking to a radio interview one day, and I said, "Thank you so much for letting me put your words to music." And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, "My wife, Margaret, reminded me, they're not my words. I just took down what the people said, and they were being honest." And so he captured honesty, and it was beautiful. And the honesty he captured inspired the greatest musical collaboration of my life. 135 New Orleans musicians played on that record, thanks to the Threadheads and the hard work they did raising money via the Pepsi grant and via extra money the Threadhead raised. So Dan impacted on my life in a huge way, and he gave me the great gift of 9 Lives as a soundtrack album that'll stand for the rest of my life. And I'm grateful to Coleman. I'm grateful to Dan, not just for his book, but for the time I got to spend with him. You know, we didn't always agree on everything, and nobody does. But I found him to be a gentleman. I found him to be just a really brilliant mind. And most importantly for me, he truly, deeply, and dearly loved his wife. And I respect that in an artist almost more than I respect their art.
You want to do a song?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do one from 9 Lives. Thanks to Michelle Mignard, who was Frank's daughter, I got to meet Frank Mignard at one of the 9 Lives performances at La Petite, and he was fantastic. We were wearing the same suit, which was just serendipitously beautiful. And I had a line in the show that said, I had every body, I was playing Frank, I had every single body autopsied after the flood because I could. And he stood up in the crowd, he pumped his fist, and he said, you're goddamn right I did. And it was just beautiful. So the last Frank song is him looking back at the age of 78 at a life that he refuses to apologize for. I'd like to do it for Dan. I'd like to do it for Dan Baum and for Frank and for Ronald, who apologized for very little in his life. What good have I done for the people of New Orleans with my choke chain of a vain and decadent life? Where's the pleasure gone? Can I get back to the glitter that kept me buzzed through my blunders and blackest nights? Looking back at a house built out of wood bins, surrounded by the walls and sadness of could-have-beens. There's no sense in dwelling on the telling should-have-beens. I'll pick up this old horn and blow in and out again. Let her run. When I was poor, all I wanted to be was rich. When I was rich, all I wanted to do was matter. Ain't that a bitch? Was I useful? I don't know. And it's not for me to decide. Truth is, it never was. Judge me after I die. Looking back at a house built out of wood bins, surrounded by the walls and sadness of could-have-beens. And when I get to the end, I'd gladly live it all again. All the would-haves and the could-haves and the should-have-beens.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I think we're supposed to turn this back over to the Garden District book people. Maybe also open this up for questions. I'm not really sure of the format.
Do it.
Yeah, we have the, if people notice on the bottom of their menu, there's a chat room, and they can enter any questions, or Chris and Paul, if y'all wanted to let people just unmute themselves, they can certainly just voice their questions and not type them out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, how do we do that?
So on your menu, you should have a little mute button. If you will click on it, you'll see where it'll say unmute.
On. Everybody scream
Gary.
at once. Everybody scream at once.
Barry, do you have a question?
No, not really. I enjoyed listening to you two. I had no doubts that Paul would find another outlet. He just has to. It's him. And Chris, you're my brother.
Thank you. Likewise.
Had no doubt. No doubt all would be fine.
Thank you, brother.
I'm getting all misty.
Yeah, got a question?
Stephen? No?
Dave's got a shade-eating grin on, right, Mallow? He's been pounding them beers.
No, I've only had two.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't have a question, but I just got the book the other day. I was a little late getting it, but I can't wait to get into it. I already know the end of the story though, so it's already been ruined for me. But no, I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to. I remember you're doing your video blogs, and those were really heavy duty. They were I know that everybody on this call got emotional. That was keeping up with you as you were over there going through it, man. It was. I was along for the ride. We were all along for the ride because you are so open and willing to share that with us, even before you wrote your book. So
Thank you. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the blogs, both the written blogs and the video blogs, formed the basis of the book. I had stopped blogging for the most part after the first year and a half, or as frequently as I had been doing. But that formed the basis of the book. I'm seeing a question from Peter in the chat box. It says, was the act of writing the book cathartic, cleansing, all that? It's wonderful read. Thank you, Peter, for saying that. It was when I started writing the book in March of this year. I got the idea for it in January, and then it took me a couple months to figure out how I wanted to write it. But once I started writing it, I knew I had to get it out. I had to get it out. And I was writing like a maniac every day. I don't know if it was cathartic was the right word, actually, to be honest with you. It was hard. I mean, reliving all that stuff, telling my kids that they found cancer. And for those of you who read the book, what happened on Christmas Day, I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't read it, but Christmas Day of 2016, where I thought that was going to be the last Christmas I was going to be alive. Maybe Peter, if you ask me this question in a couple of years, maybe I'll look back at this as cathartic and cleansing. But right now, I'm not sure that's. I think the answer would be no right now. I think it's more I just had to get this book out. Oh, a question from Gaylee, someone I went to college with. Are all your included family and friends good with it? Great question. Some haven't read it. My kids have not read it yet. As they have said to me, we lived it. So they'll read it on their own time when they're ready. My ex-wife has read it. My girlfriend has read it. They both really, really enjoyed it. There's been a couple things that, because everyone's memory is their own memory, it doesn't mean that it's 100% accurate. And there were a couple things that Susie reminded of that I had like 90% right, but not 100% right. But people have been very nice, either giving me good feedback or not saying anything at all. But no one has said anything negative about it, which is great.
Chris, I think Paul had mentioned that you had gone to Germany for treatment.
I did.
That was obviously after you decided to stop chemo.
Yeah, I stopped chemo in March of 2017. I went to Germany in late April of 2017, which was a great thing to do. The only bad part was I missed Jazz Fest that year. Yeah, Germany. I don't, to this day, I don't really know what helped, and I suspect there were a lot of things, both the alternative stuff I did in Germany, and then I did some Western medicine, immunotherapy here in the US after that. I think it all helped, I really do. But yeah, what I do know with 100% certainty is that Germany helped starting the healing process of my body after the devastation of chemotherapy. The fact that people donated thousands and thousands of dollars to help fund my trip that really, really meant a lot to me and still does. Yeah, I mean, this, you know, it takes a village may sound like a cliche, but it's true. It's also true. And I don't think I'd be around if not for the help of so many people. I think that may be it.
Any other
A
questions, or? If people are interested, I'm going to put on the chat room a link to buying the book online at the bookstore. So if anybody was interested, they can go right there, and we'll be happy to get a copy out to them.
Thank you guys for
Yeah,
hosting this.
thanks for hosting.
And
Thanks
Oh,
very much.
our pleasure.
And-
Very moving stories on both sides of the screen here, and really kind of life affirming. Also, just hearing about all the support that you all gave each other. It's what we're here for, and we need to remember that, I think, every day.
Absolutely. Especially now.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris.
Pleasure having you
Thank you,
both.
Paul.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hello, everybody.
So long.
Good night, everybody.
Night,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Love you guys.
Yes,
Love
indeed.
you all too.
Happy Halloween.
Barry, let me have a little bit of that stuff, Barry, will you? Can you pass it over to me?
Sure.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, here you go.
Woo! Okay.
Good night. Thanks.
Thanks, bye. See ya.
Night, all.
Good night.
Okay, Bear.
So cute.
Yeah.
How do you close this fucking thing anyway? Oh,
Leave.
bye.
Bye. Just leave. Leave me